everybody, and welcome to Sunday Dinner with Chef Joe. Today we're going south. We're going to New Orleans, and we're going to have ourselves a good old time, and we are going to enjoy it. We're going to tell some fun stories, and we're going to be making jambalaya. That's right, I'm giving you guys my secret recipe to jambalaya. Jambalaya that we're gonna we'll take the drink over and start cooking. The jambalaya that we're gonna be making today is a takeoff on a recipe from Chef Paul Prudhomme. And Chef Paul Prudhomme was a master New Orleans chef who I highly enjoyed eating his cooking and learning about his cooking. In fact, I have a book, I don't have it out here, but I have a book that was given to my wife and I when we got married, and it was his cookbook signed by him, I remember it said, "Good loving, good eating." I just remember that part, which was his trademark. And anyways, when I spent a lot of time in New Orleans and got to go to his restaurant, Cape Paul's, when it was down there. And so really this is a tribute to him because this is very close to his. I've changed it. This has really become mine over the years. And what's even cooler about this recipe of jambalaya today is we're going to be making it on the grill outside in this beautiful blue sky weather that we're having here in New England. And I'm just digging this weather. And you know what? This humidity that we're having is just like it was in New Orleans. So like I said, I spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I went down there several times, sometimes on vacation, sometimes for work. And if you remember, I told you, I think on our last episode, that I used to do things beyond cooking before I was a cook, before I was a chef. And before that, I was in the entertainment business. And so obviously New Orleans is one of the entertainment capitals of America. And so I spent a lot of time down there. But the most amount of time was about it was about 4 months that I spent down there working on a show called Satchmo, America's Musical Legend, which was supposed to go to Broadway and started working its way up the East Coast, but never made it to Broadway, unfortunately. I still love the show. I always loved the show. The critics didn't love the show. Anyway, but I spent so much time down there and I got to learn so much about cooking. And I learned about drinking and I learned about eating. And I gained, I think, 20 pounds over the course of that 3-4 months that I was down there. But it all going into what we're making today. So today we're making jambalaya. Jambalaya is a lot of ingredients, but really not that hard to make. All right, so here's what we're going to do. First and foremost, we need to get our spice mix out, and we're going to mix that together. And this really is one of the lifebloods to this recipe. So let's pull that off. All right, so we're starting off with. Now I'm giving you actually the half recipe because that's what fits in these pans better. But you can, so you double this and you could have the full recipe. So anyways, we're going with 1 bay leaf, and we're going with 1 teaspoon of salt, and we're going with 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, and a teaspoon of oregano. And we've got half a teaspoon of white pepper, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, and a half a teaspoon of thyme going in it. And that's our spice mix. So we're going to leave that alone for a minute, and you'll see where that comes in. Next, we're going to take 3 tablespoons minimum. This original recipe from Chef Paul always called for butter because butter is a huge part of cooking, but I've changed it to actually try to make it a little healthier for you. So I'm using at least 3 tablespoons, as I say, of nice good olive oil that goes into a hot pan. All right, and then we are going to add a half a cup andouille sausage that I chopped and I just bought in the store, and we're going to put that in the pan and we're going to let that cook. And we're going to cook that until it's nice and crisp. All right. Now, while we're waiting for that, let's talk a little. Let's tell some stories. All right, so I got to tell you this great story. So there is one of my friends who can definitely vouch for this story, I believe, and it's on Facebook. His name is Brian, and so Brian was helping with the theater managing of the theater where we were doing Satchmo. Brian was from New Orleans and enjoyed it and wanted to take me out on the town. Brian and I are the same age and wanted to take me out on the town. So one night, after a night of we had been drinking on Bourbon Street, Brian pulls up in a car with another friend, and I believe his name was Harry. And yes, before he was famous, it was the Harry Connick Jr. And they pull up in a car and they taking me out on the town. And these guys were crazy, man. I'm telling you, we were up on a sidewalk. But the scariest part of all, and the sidewalk at the French Quarter, no less. But the scariest part of all was when they took me at around midnight to those above-ground cemeteries. And oh my God, it was scary. Talk about a haunted house movie, man. That was like the ultimate haunted movie. Anyways, I'll never forget that. So Brian, if you see this, and I know you're on Facebook with me, I'm sure you'll remember the story. Anyways, so we've let this crisp up a little bit. So now we're going to start adding our next ingredients. So next we're going to add what we call the Holy Trinity. Now in regular French cooking, that would be the mirepoix. And the mirepoix normally is onions, celery, and carrots. But not, the Cajuns are a little crazy, man. They like to change things up. So theirs is, the Holy Trinity is onions, celery, and green peppers, or bell peppers. So we're going to add that to our recipe next. Onions, peppers, and green peppers, and celery, all in there. And so what we're doing, this is about a half cup each of onions, peppers, and what I've really said is, look, just, use what you got. But that's about what you want, about a half cup of each. All right, and we're gonna let that just sweat out a little bit. What you want that to do is you want that to cook, but you don't want it to get overcooked. You still want it to be kind of firm because it's going to be in here for a while. So right now we've got our Holy Trinity going, and we've got our and we're looking. So, anyways, some more cool stuff. The best gumbo I ever had was, and my friend Richard, I know you also are on Facebook once in a while. There's a lot of people who know you. So Richard took me to across the river from New Orleans to Algiers, and he took me to a place where he had met some guys that did the parade, that were part of the parade that he went to, and he got to go on the float. And in the parade, anyway, so this guy owned a restaurant in Algiers, and I went over there, and I have to tell you, I had gumbo like I'd never had before. This gumbo, there was huge pieces of crab claws and big, like huge shrimp. It was like amazing, and it was cheap, and it was like, it's just a regular restaurant. I was like that's what the locals eat, and I was just like blown away, absolutely blown away. All right, so we've let these sweat out a little bit. It's now time to start adding some more ingredients. So now we're going to add chicken. So this is one chicken breast, boneless, skinless chicken breast, and we're gonna dump that in. Oh, you know what? We need to start adding our seasoning in here first. Sorry. All right. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. Here's our seasoning mix. Remember we put that together? All that stuff? It's going in, baby. Going in for the kill. All right. It's in. Now, immediately, I really wish we had smell sense on these steaks, because immediately you get this. You already get the aroma of the Holy Trinity and the sausage, and now you get all those spices that just went in there. All right. So we're going to let that work, and then we're going to take our one chicken breast, boneless, skinless chicken breast, and I've cut it, diced it up into like bite-sized pieces, and we're going to add that to it. Real simple. All right, and now we're going to brown that. I'm moving it back on the heat a little bit on this grill, because what I want it to do is I want it to start cooking. So while that's cooking, we're going to also tell some more stories. So let's talk about the drink. So we're talking about, this is a hurricane. Hurricanes are probably the most famous drink in New Orleans. To me, they're not that great tasting, but people drink them because it's New Orleans. This glass came from Pat O'Brien's in New Orleans. And, it's got a lot of like cherries and grenadine and a lot of rum. And if it's not made right, it tastes a lot like cough medicine. And, but it's really I'm telling you right now, 2 of these at Pat O'Brien's, and you're not walking home very well. That's all I'm going to say. There's a lot of rum in it. A lot of rum. All right, so let's see what we're doing here. So, anyways, I got to spend a lot of time in Louisiana prior to the opening of the show that we did in New Orleans. And I drove all around the bayous, and one of the funniest things that I didn't know. Remember I was telling you in the last episode that I was a victim of identity fraud? Well, that was about around the same time that I was in the South. And I'm driving around in these small towns, enjoying myself, going to all these little places, and I'm this Yankee that definitely doesn't have a Southern accent. And needless to say, I didn't know it, but at the time, when they were tracking this guy down who was the identity, there was actually a warrant out there for my name. And here I am driving around the South at the exact same time. So that could have literally turned into quite an interesting story. I'll make sure I don't... I made sure I didn't know anything about it, and which I didn't. So, anyways, all right. So our chicken's getting brown here, and we want the chicken. We want to add it, and then we want to cook them and saute them until they're tender, but not. They want to be firm but tender. Now these are a little rare still, so we're going to let that just saute a little more. And in the meantime, we're going to pull out what we're going to do next. So next, we're going to start adding some of our other ingredients. I'm going to throw some garlic in there next. And this is, again, half teaspoon of, or actually this is 1 teaspoon of fresh minced garlic. And we're throwing that in there. As you can see, we're building some flavors on here, guys. We are totally building flavors. All right. So we're getting that going. Next, we are going to add our chicken stock. Oh, excuse me. No, we're going to add our tomatoes next. Let's add our tomatoes. So, my original recipe called for fresh tomatoes. The problem this time of year, as we all know, is up here, at least in the north, is that tomatoes are just starting to come into season. Just starting. They haven't really made it yet. So, I changed this recipe to a 128-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes, and I'm using half of those tomatoes. I chopped them and up. I saved the juice, and I'll show you what we're going to do with the juice from that can in a minute. So this is those tomatoes, and we're throwing those in there to now work. They're magic. All right, I'm going to let that cook for 1 second. Then we're going to add that juice I talked to you about this is the juice from it. So this is again 4 ounces actually of, or half a cup of the juice from that can of tomatoes. And we're going to let that all work in really nicely here for a minute. All right. And then next, we are going to add our chicken stock, or excuse me, seafood stock. I'm so used to using chicken stock. Anyways, this is seafood stock. We're doing a seafood chicken thing. If you don't have seafood stock, you can definitely use chicken stock or veggie stock. This is seafood stock, and I'm using a cup of seafood stock in this recipe. In my full recipe, it's 2 cups. But this is 1 cup that we're adding to this of seafood stock. All right, and now we're going to let that whole thing come to a boil. So I'm going to bring that so it gets some good heat, and we're going to wait till that comes to a boil. Meanwhile, we're going to fix our messes up here a little bit so I could tell you guys some more stories. So, anyways, I've got, oh my God, I have so many stories about New Orleans. There was some crazy times down there. But I have to tell you, the food, phenomenal. K. Paul's, I got to tell you about K. Paul's. So K. Paul's was again owned by Chef Paul Prudhomme, and the food I had heard was always fantastic. So I show up there, and at the time, K. Paul's did not take reservations. It was a line out the door. It was first come, first serve, and they shared tables. So you might be sitting with somebody else. So next to K. Paul's line was one of these outdoor takeout bars where you could just walk up, grab a hurricane, and go back and stand in line. So I did. And just like a ski line, being a single, I was all by myself. Being a single is, oh my God, is the way to go when you're doing that. So I moved right up the line really quickly. And next thing you know, they're asking for a single. I go in, I sit with these other people. And what I had that night, I had blackened prime rib. And you're like, you didn't have like one of the traditionals? No, I wanted, the waiter literally was bragging about this, so I had it. And I'm gonna tell you, out of all the food I've had, and I've had all the traditional food down there, I've eaten at the best restaurants down there, and I can tell you that blackened prime rib was the best thing I ever ate in New Orleans. And the reason I know that is because I have the memory to be able to tell you this story, almost 30 years later. So it's really amazing. So we've got this. We've got our. This is starting to come to a boil. So now we're going to start adding our last ingredients to it. And so now we're going to add our shrimp. So I have here a half a pound of 1620 shrimp. I have oysters, and I have the juice that the oysters are in, and I have the rice, and we'll talk about the rice. Oh, and I have some chopped onions. So first and foremost, we're gonna green onions, or they're scallions, or green onions, and I have right here about half a cup of green onions, and we're going to throw that in there. Put that in there. As you can see, we're just building flavor, and we're building flavor, and we're building flavor. You know what it's very similar to? The Spanish, when they make paella. This is a very similar type of recipe to paella. So now we're going to add our shrimp, okay, to it. And we're going to add I got lots of oysters, and it calls for at least this. If we're doing the half recipe, it calls for about 5 ounces of oysters and the liquor that they come in. So that's what we're putting in. All right. And we're gonna stir that around real quick and get that all mixed in there, because again, you're gonna see what we're doing in a second here. That is what the key to this whole thing is, to finishing it all up. So we mix it all up. Now we're gonna add in our rice. So I'm using a cup of Uncle Ben's rice. Okay, it's a converted rice. I know it. Some people are saying, "Oh man, you're using processed rice and all that." Let me tell you something. You want to make jambalaya right, you use this rice. Okay, as long as it's converted rice. You don't have to use the brand that I bought, but you can, as long as it's converted rice. Converted means that it is parboiled. Okay, so they parboil it at the factory, and then they dry it, and all that does is speed up our process. So if you want to cook and you want your seafood and your chicken and everything to be tasting normal and not overcooked, please use parboiled rice or converted rice. All right, it's what Chef Paul Perdone uses it or used it. All right, so we're putting that in. We threw the oysters in. We had about so oysters. So we live here in New England. It's a little easier for us to get oysters, and we can shuck them ourselves or whatever. But if you can't get oysters fresh like that, you can buy oysters in a can. And they cut. I think actually, I hate to say it, but Bumblebee, I think actually makes canned oysters. So you can. They sell them it's usually where like the tuna fish aisle is, that area. And there's sardines and all the smoked fish. It's in that area. They have smoked ones, and I don't recommend smoked ones. And the reason is they're they're cooked or pre-cooked, and you don't want pre-cooked. You want them to be raw, and so that they'll cook inside this. All right. So we got everything in there. We got our rice. We got our seafood. We got our chicken. We got our sausage. We got all our Holy Trinity and our tomatoes. And we're going to take that and we're going to cover it now. All right, and you want to give it a good cover. And I'm actually going to help this. And the reason I'm doing this is not because I'm trying to keep it from losing all the moisture. And it's hot, and cast iron doesn't always, make the foil behave the way we want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, hang on one second, folks. We're gonna take this and we're going to bring it over to the non-lit part of our grill, and we're gonna let that cook for 20 minutes. And in the meantime, you know how I said this was the half recipe? Well, here's the other half of your recipe. So this is our jambalaya that is completed. Now, first thing you do, most important thing you do before you pull anything, you cook this, serve this, is, hang on, I gotta grab is you want to get the bay leaf out. Remember we had a bay leaf in there? The bay leaf usually flows to the top while it's cooking, which is great. So we're just gonna get rid of that. All right, so we have this beautiful dish of jambalaya. It's 20 minutes in the oven on the non-lit side of the grill, and 20 minutes and it should be done. I set my timer 20 minutes and this is exactly what it looked like when it was done. So let's pull ourselves out. It looks absolutely delicious. Oh, I cannot wait to try this. Got to get some shrimp in there. Some peppers, gotta have it all. All right, I got my jambalaya, I got my drink, my hurricane, and I am ready to go. So I'll see you next week in a different city virtually, and we will try and make some more cool, fun stuff, tell some more fun stories. Until next week, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy. See you next week on Sunday Dinner with Chef Joe.